Yeah. But next question she sent in, what advice, Kelsey, do you have for someone who has struggled with sexual addiction when they experience temptation and sexual desire? Sexual desire is natural, but oftentimes it brings up an image, video, or audio of something you've seen before. It's frustrating because it's a natural part of life, but I feel like I'm majorly sinning every time I have a sexual desire. Thanks.
Yes. First off, obviously you are not majorly sinning every time you have a sexual desire.
That's good to know.
First thing, I think, there's a difference between something popping into your mind and letting that play out, that fantasy, whether it's acting it out physically or even just fantasizing in your mind and letting it carry out mentally. And so when an image, a memory of something pops into your mind, praying right then and there and asking Jesus, please take this away from me. I even had, a counselor, he was saying a very important thing. He was also a trained spiritual director, said, before those things pop into your mind, you can go into a holy hour, go in front of him in adoration and just say, Jesus, have a memory flash. He's like, don't dwell on it. And then just say, Jesus, I do not desire this memory. Please take it from me. And actively praying through some of these memories and some of these images that we might have, and asking Jesus to take them away. And it has to be an honest, a deep desire. It's not like, Jesus, take it, but actually, can I keep it for later on next week when I'm struggling? You need to truly desire this to be gone and start praying through. But having one come into your mind is not a sin. And it is human. It is natural. You could have a thought of, it doesn't have to be pornography. It could just be like you have a wave of anger and you're like, oh, that makes me mad. But then you go, but I forgive them. And right, that you have not acted out the sin of anger. You've had a thought, an emotion, a moment, and that is very healthy. And I think it's those thoughts and those temptations that really allow virtue to come forth. We were talking about our bodies as a way of sanctification. I mean, these temptations can be great opportunities for us to put into practice the will and the intellect of what God gave us, of, okay, I'm not going to choose this. I'm going to choose what I know is good for me and good for the other. And I'm going to choose to put this away. And that's when let's say it's late at night and you're in your room and this memory comes by. It might be getting up out of bed, going and getting a drink of water, getting out your rosary, reading a book, getting your mind off of it. It might require that, especially the first few times. So you can get into the habit of removing it instantly from your mind without maybe some of those other means. But finding healthy ways to distract yourself, get your brain on a different track, if you will, can all be really helpful ways to really build that virtue that we need in all areas of our life. So
one thing I'll throw in that I've at least found to be helpful in my own life is that attraction sparks a desire for union. That's totally natural. It's just that longing to be united to that person. And, when we have like a shame-based idea of like, hey, I had a desire, I'm sinning, there's this unnecessary tension in us because we should respond to the human body in love. And so that flashback is an invitation to love. And so, well, how do I love a flashback of my ex-boyfriend? How do I love a flashback of some pornographic pop-up ad or movie I saw 2 years ago? Well, I would say bring that actor or actress to God and say, God, this man is specifically on my mind right now. He's a son of yours. He's a child of yours. I don't know where he's at in life right now. Maybe he's still in the porn industry. Maybe he's doing whatever. I don't know. But God, I'm just going to offer up this, like you said, rosary for him. I'm going to respond to the very thought of him by personalizing him. John Paul II, in his book, Love and Responsibility, talked about chastity being the quickness of the will to affirm the person's personal value. And so their sensual value comes at us. And, the thought is, just to deflect. But like, what if we okay, yep, there's a sexual value there and there's a good sexual value, but where's that personal value? And now let me lean in towards that and love this person. Let me fast for this person. Let me, atone for the times I've used them in my imagination or with my own body by using my body to pray for them with fasting or pulling out the rosary or doing whatever. And so that way you're actually, in a very pure and beautiful sense, uniting yourself with this person. And God will bestow graces upon that individual that they will only become aware of in heaven. At that point, they will see how much you interceded for them. And imagine if you get bombarded with temptations 20 times a day and you keep turning into 20 more Hail Marys for that guy or whatever, and that grace applies to him and he starts living it out or has a conversion down the road, and then imagine the unity that the two of you will have in heaven for all eternity as a brother and sister in Christ, that you are pouring upon him intercessory graces and penances and fasting or whatever, and the union of love that you two will have as you stand with your glorified bodies before the beatific vision of heaven is so much greater than any bogus intimacy that the porn culture had ever promised you on earth. And so maybe God does want to fulfill your desires for unity, but just in a much more beautiful way. And so temptations, like Hel said, it's going to come. A priest told me there's a difference between having a bird fly over your head and letting it make a nest in your hair. So plenty of those things are going to fly by. But, I read one saying, he said, don't be disturbed by that. You don't want to lose in the, it was Father Jacques Philippe said, like, one of the most important rules in spiritual warfare is not to lose your peace, even during times of a fall. And so sometimes when we fall and we're overly distraught about it, it's a sign of pride, of self-reliance, of, I can't believe I sinned. Why? Well, don't lose your peace. Even in the midst of feeling disappointed in yourself and frustrated, like, it's been 2 years, I'm still wrestling with this. The Holy Spirit's going to give you a peace in that of like, but God's with you in the battle. He's with you in the struggle. He loves you and he'll complete the good work in you. So it's okay to feel that restlessness, but the scrupulosity, self-hatred, self-loathing, discouragement, that's the evil spirit, is not the Holy Spirit. But, let's say, Kelsey, someone's been wrestling with this and kind of putting it off and, like you had mentioned, kind of retaining an affection for that sin. Almost like it's like an old companion that's been with them through some pretty dark times. And to cut it off is like severing an old friendship. There's a bond there that's been created. Someone I've turned to when times have gotten lonely. How can this habitual falling into this false companionship derail not just a person's dating relationships, but derail their vocation if they don't sever and renounce this fondness that they've created in their heart for sin?
Yeah, I remember after one of my talks, I had a woman come up to me and she was in tears, just so vulnerably sharing with me that she had been working for almost 5 years, tried everything in the book to rid herself of this. And then, she composed herself and was like, I've done everything, basically. Like, what else can I do? And I asked her that very simple question, like, do you actually desire freedom from this? And she looked at me like, well, of course I do. I've done X, Y, Z. Here's my list. And I was just like, no, but do you actually desire freedom? Can you say tomorrow that this wasn't an option for you, that you would be okay, that for the rest of your life, no matter what came up, you lose your job, there's a death in the family, whatever, you do not have this anymore as a crutch. And you just saw her face and it just went blank. And I was like, do you trust that Jesus can actually fulfill you in all of those ways and not this? And it is a very scary thought to someone who has been using this as a crutch, a way to any type of insecurity, any type of emotional depression or despair. This can be a crutch and a way to escape it. And if you don't have that, and then that can be a huge obstacle to truly seeking freedom in these things. And so I think all of that to say, you're looking at that kind of what you were saying, the vocation aspect. What are we looking ahead towards? What is some of the hope set before us that can guide us in the right way? Vocationally, this harms men and women in many different ways. We were talking about those studies earlier. Every secular and religious study is saying the same thing, that this is going to harm your physical experience of sex today and moving forward. So I don't even have the gamut of studies on hand, but, a man's ability to perform sexually is hindered. Women's ability to climax is completely hindered. And so if you think about that, your desire to be united in marriage, an addiction to pornography could be very debilitating in that area. If you're looking at emotional connections, it severs that ability. There's men and women in studies that are showing that the brain actually changes. The more exposure you have to pornography and masturbation, the more false amounts of chemicals, dopamine and oxytocin are poured around your brain. And oxytocin is the relationship establishing, like bonding chemical. And you're bonding yourself to a screen, right? To whatever you're watching pornography on. And so you actually begin to have an excitement, like your heart rate will increase, your whole body chemistry will change at the turning on of a computer screen. Like they actually have studies that show the whatever sound that your computer makes, maybe it's a humming sound from the fan, maybe it's a little beep, whatever, that your body will actually get excited about that sound because you're actually creating an emotional connection, a relational connection to your screen, to your phone, whatever it is. And when we hear that, we're like, what? That's not okay. They showed that there's an app creator who left the app creating business, and now he does anti-technology speaking on like TED Talks and what. And he said that the color in your phone is identical to that of casinos. The red is that addictive, that they actually have made it so that the colors on your screen. And so I even have it where there's like a way to turn it black and white. You can't see that black and white screen. But different things like that to like keep yourself not addicted to these things. And the reason why we want to protect ourselves is whenever you talk to women too, and you talk about your future life, whether it's religious life and you're going to be hopefully married to Jesus Christ, the greatest spouse in the world, or you're married in holy matrimony on this earth, I hope that you have the desire that this man is who I'm going to be with of my life, and we're going to love and care for each other. We're going to provide for each other. He's going to sacrifice for me. I'm going to sacrifice for him. We're going to lay our lives down for each other. We're going to be partners and raise our children together in this world. And there's just this aching in our hearts. And you start to speak to a woman, and if you're listening, like, and they're like, yes, that's what I desire. Everything else is going to directly hurt that. Any distortion of love. And I think in dating, if you were to look at dating as a precursor for this, let's say you're trying to date a guy, but you have these addictions on the side, you actually are attracted to a different type of man. They have brain chemistry that shows you're actually attracted to a more aggressive man, probably due to the nature of the violence found. But statistically speaking, you are attracted to a more violent guy. So let's say you have that while you're dating, and you start to seek healing and you get married. You actually might not be as attracted to your spouse anymore. I could go into the chemicals of that. And same for men and maybe what they're attracted to leading into that. So I could go on, and I don't want to just continue to hit that way, but all of these things are not going to aid in you pursuing your final vocation of marriage and potentially religious life. If anything, they're just going to derail it completely and keep you from where God is calling you to be. So,
And I think that the good news, the kind of the silver lining, is that the neuroplasticity of the brain, as scary as it can be, can also be bent back, in the right direction. You're talking about the sound of that computer going on and your brain kind of lighting up. I remember in college taking some psychology courses, and, Pavlov's dog, the trained response where he kind of rings the bell, feeds the dog, rings the bell, feeds the dog. And eventually all he's got to do is ring that bell and the dog starts to salivate. This is the trained response we can do with our brains. And I had once read that the kind of the pleasure center of your brain, your medial preoptic nucleus, this is the part of the brain that gets trained so easily. So if you're a heroin addict, that's the pleasure, the rewards part of the brain. And so when we kind of associate sexual pleasure, if you're masturbating, to porn with dirty, illicit, forbidden sexual fantasies, you're actually training your brain that what is arousing is what I'm doing. And so it's not so much that our behavior follows our desires also follow our behavior. And so if we're behaving in this way, we're bending our brain in that direction. But I'd seen once that they did an autopsy of a concert violinist after they had passed away, and found out on a neurological level that the part of the brain that was associated with the fine motor skills, of their hand was physically larger than normal cadavers, because their brain had actually grown because of how much practice had been done there in that specific area. But like I said, the beautiful thing is the neuroplasticity of it. We can bend these things back if they've been bent kind of in the wrong direction. It just kind of takes time and effort depending on how long and the severity of type of porn that we've, marinated ourselves into. And so sometimes counseling can be a huge help, and there's lots of resources out there for that. I'm sure you've got them on your resource page at the website there, some counselors or different accountability programs and healing stuff.
Different healing retreats and programs.